Hi, welcome everybody. We're going to give just a minute to allow time for participants to join us. We'll get started shortly.
It was a beautiful day in New York today, right?
Lovely in New Jersey as well.
Yay.
Finally
It's good to see
feel
the sunshine.
All right, why don't we go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody. If you've joined us for our previous webinars, welcome back. And if this is your first time, we really appreciate you being here today to talk about coping and conflict management. I'm Andrea Temkin. I'm a clinical psychologist at the New-York-Presbyterian Weill Cornell Youth Anxiety Center, and we're here today with Dr. Amory Albano, who is site director of the New-York-Presbyterian Q-Card Youth Anxiety Center and a wonderful expert in this field of emerging adults and anxiety. So we're lucky to have her here with us today, and we hope we can be helpful as we talk today about coping and conflict management. A brief just informational point: if you have questions, feel free to submit them through the Q&A feature that you'll notice at the bottom of your screen. We ask that you don't raise your hands. We won't be able to call on people live, but do feel free to submit your questions. We got a bunch of questions from you all ahead of time, so we'll try to answer those throughout. And at the end of the webinar, you'll be prompted to fill out a brief survey, 3 questions. It should take you 60 seconds or less. We really appreciate any feedback you have on this webinar or thoughts you have on other topics you'd like to see in the future. All right.
Great. And let's get going. Thank you, Andrea, for opening this up too. And one of the things we also should say is Weill Cornell and Columbia University Medical Centers are in partnership through the New York Presbyterian Hospital System for delivering these webinars through our Youth Anxiety Center. So we thank all of our supporters who are joining us on this webinar, and we're happy to be here. We work with youth who are between the ages of roughly 14 to 30 years of age, this wide range of what's called emerging adulthood and adolescence. And so we're focusing on parenting strategies at this time, especially during the pandemic time, but at any time as you are raising your adolescents into the full range of adulthood. So the agenda for tonight, as we get started here, is we want to focus on, first of all, you as parents. This particular webinar is geared towards parents. Our other webinars that we have, the schedule at the end of the others that are coming, focus on parents and also separate ones on the youth themselves. So if can we move the slide to the agenda, we're going to check in with you first, and then we're going to talk about building your reserves, and then what it's like for your teen or young adult and managing conflicts then, because this is a time as they're home, and many of them are back with you, when conflict can run high, when there's a lot of tension. So let's check in with you first, because this is an extraordinary time, as we all know. This is a time where there's great uncertainty in the world as to what this virus is, where, how, when, why do you get it, what, and in what way will it manifest, who's carrying it for how long, and so forth. So we've been rocked by this pandemic. And of course, if you're like me, if you're like Andrea, we're home now. I think this is week 9 that we're all on stay at home. And it's been, a time of adjustment through this great uncertainty. At the same time, we're getting a lot of information and learning how to take care of ourselves, which we want to talk about. And then we'll be adjusting, as you know, as many places are starting to open up again. So we have to adjust to a new normal of how things will be as we get back into the world safely, and what things might look like going forward. But there's still a lot of uncertainty that's going to happen. For example, one thing is University of California has made its decision not to open up their campuses for the fall, but many high schools and colleges around the country have not made their decisions yet as to what's going to happen. So lots of uncertainty. Okay, if we see the next slide, for you as parents, before you can really help your youth, your young adult, you have to ask yourself and check in, how are you doing? What's going on with you? Have things changed for you in such a way that's affected the way you feel? Are you going through a range of emotions easily frustrated, irritable, feeling maybe numb or indifferent at times, sad, and also isolated, because your lives have changed dramatically too, as well as that of your kids. Maybe you're at home working. Maybe you're used to working at home, but now you have the other family members there all the time. Maybe you are a healthcare provider and you have to be separated from your family because you're on the front lines. There's so many different things that are going on that can be affecting you in the way that you're feeling. And this is never more true too than if you have lost somebody or are worried about ill family members or yourself during the time of this pandemic. Next slide, please. So we want to check in with ourselves first. Think about how and in what ways has your environment changed? I mean, one of the things, again, physically, has your environment changed because you have more people in it than you're used to? You may be having spaces that are for your kids' schooling, for your own work, that are usually just open spaces for the family. How has things like that changed for you so that physically you're stuck in the house more than you want to be or normally would be? And so that is causing you some emotional distress and upset. How have your attitudes changed? And this is something to check in how you're experiencing that. What are the emotions that you might be having? And one of the things we must say is it's normal that we have a whole big range of emotions right now. We're all in this together, in that it's human to experience different emotions that you don't normally have on a day-to-day basis because of the fact that it's so extraordinary at this time. What's your body telling you? Are you feeling tightness, numbness, tingling? Are you tense and stressed? Are you feeling stiff because you're not moving around in the world the way that you used to? What's going on with your body, and what cues are they sending to you about your emotions? And then a big one here, of course, is, are you having a tough time interacting with and just hanging out with and just being with your partner and or your kids, and especially with the young adults that are home with you now? Or are you feeling more isolated in ways? And look, we've had teenagers, our kids are older. We know they go through times that they don't want to talk. They don't want to be around you. You know, is that making you feel more isolated and estranged from them? So what's going on with your relationships? That's a question too. So check in with yourself, because it's important that you cope and you develop these coping skills that we want to talk about tonight for you and also for your kids. Now, a big thing for parents, and you know this better than anyone, from the time you had your child or children, anything that would go wrong for them, from skin knees and bumps to getting a disappointing grade to somebody one of the kids on the playground's pushing them down or arguing, what's the natural parental instinct? Step in, comfort, protect, reassure your child, and fix the situation. Well, right now, with your teenagers being at home from school, your young adults home from college, and everyone in a state of emergency and uncertainty, you want to probably fix things and make as much better as possible for them. But that's very hard to do. And you want to protect them, and you want to make sure that they're going to be okay. But of course, they have independent minds and thoughts about how things should be, and they may be at odds with what you're thinking. So it's really difficult to provide support for your youth at times like this when, you know, it's really tough. So what do you do and how do you cope with that? This is a question we have. Andrew, do you want to talk a bit?
Yeah. So, you know, everyone has heard this before, but it's really crucial that you're prioritizing your needs. And everyone's seen this graphic. You're on the airline and this flight attendant tells you, hey, if the oxygen mask comes down, put on yours before you put on somebody else's. And it's true, you'll be a more effective support for your young adult if you're not constantly running on fumes and sort of barely making it through the day. But there are a lot of barriers that pop up to this idea of prioritize me first and then your child. You know, I think parents are so focused on how your kids are doing that it's easy to forget your own needs. I have a little one, I've got an 8-month-old, and I can't tell you how many times I forget to grab myself a glass of water, or I don't get enough sleep, or whatever, because I'm focused on my little one. And some parents know, hey, I really should be trying to take care of myself, but you don't feel like you have the resources to do that, either financially, time-wise, it doesn't feel practical to do so. And then we hear from some parents that, you know, I want to be strong for my kids. So even though I'm sort of struggling, I have this sense I got to keep a stiff upper lip and just sort of deal with it, just sort of power through when things get hard. And all those concerns make total sense, right? You know, like Anne-Marie was saying, it's sort of our natural instinct to protect our babies, even when they're not babies anymore. But we see is that when parents aren't prioritizing themselves, you know, it inevitably catches up to you and it catches up to your kids. So even when it feels impossible to put your mask on first, keeping in mind that whatever time you do spend on yourself is going to make you function better, it's going to make you more effective the rest of the day, and it's going to help you parent your child in a way that's supportive and helpful for them. So in talking about parent coping, we both want to talk about how do we build our reserves in general, and then later we'll talk about, but what do you do in those really stressful moments? So the idea of building your reserves is you want to create a general sense of well-being in your life so that when you hit that roadblock, when you hit that speed bump, you have something to buffer you a little bit. You don't immediately, you know, reach your boiling point and sort of fly off. So the priority here is really self-care and fulfilling your basic needs: eating, sleeping, hygiene. And if we think of our distress as being like a thermometer, we really want to try to stay close to zero. It's not always possible, right? But we want to try and keep our distress level relatively low so that when a big problem emerges, our young adult says they don't want to help with dinner. We get a phone call from work saying that we have to come in, even though we're not so sure how safe it is right now. We don't boil over. And if you're tired, if you're hungry, if you're not feeling well, your numbers are ticking higher, 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 and it's not going to take very much to push you over the edge. And then beyond those basic needs, we want to try to carve out time for activities that make us feel good, or make us feel calm, or feel fulfilled in some way. And that's going to help us reset that distress meter so we're better equipped to manage our problems. So in thinking about, okay, that sounds great, but how do I actually do that? We want to think about what's a realistic plan that's going to help us feel good in the long run. And so if you want, you can sort of see this graph on the slide. You can pull out a piece of paper, create a similar little chart for yourself if it would be helpful. But you want to start by picking 1 to 2 areas of your life that you think would be helpful to focus on. Selecting areas that you know, hey, if I made a little bit of progress on this, it would probably have a good impact on my mood or my well-being. So let's take, for example, you pick sleep. In an ideal world, we'd all get 8 hours, right? Not always so realistic. And then I want to think about what's my long-term goal. If 8 hours isn't realistic, maybe I really would like to get 7. Great. But if right now with my 8-month-old, I'm getting 5 or 6, I want to start with 1 small concrete step I can take this week. So maybe that's, I'm going to make sure that I get to bed 15 minutes earlier rather than watching that extra Netflix show, right? Or I'm going to try and fit in 1 20-minute nap a few days a week. I'm not immediately going to jump to my long-term goal. I'm just going to find 1 small activity that I can do to try and chip away and make some progress in the right direction. And you can do that with lots of different domains, right? So if you want to pick hobbies and you would really love to bake a beautiful cake, maybe the small concrete task you make is looking up a recipe. Or if it's socializing and you really want to make sure that you're talking with friends 5 times a week, maybe you start with just texting 2 people that you really like. So we're trying to find ways to make this manageable. We're not jumping to things that are really time intensive or take a lot of money or what have you. We're talking about small practical steps that again will help you build those reserves in the long run. And if you're feeling stuck about that, you can think of a few different tips. So again, the first thing is we want to create realistic expectations. Don't say you're going to sleep 10 hours if you have a full-time job and kids that wake up at 6 a.m., right? Don't say you're going to run 10 miles 3 months from now if you haven't exercised in a year. So pick something that feels doable. And then start with that small, reasonable goal. It's easy to get really excited and eager. And I feel like at the start of quarantine, everyone's like, yeah, I'm gonna bake all the bread and I'm gonna learn this new hobby and brush off my, trumpet playing skills. And that's exciting and fun. But realistically, it's hard to, bite off something that large and really follow through. So think of, again, something a small, reasonable commitment. And then feel free to give yourself some rewards for the little steps you're making along the way. It's really hard to prioritize and make time for yourself. So if you need a little extra incentive, like your favorite piece of candy or your favorite song in the background as you're working on that cake decorating, do it. And get your family and friends to encourage you. Get your partner to remind you, hey, you did a great job, getting to sleep a little bit earlier, or text your best friend to make sure that you are getting to sleep a little earlier, or that you went for that walk, whatever it is. And then think about the barriers that are likely to pop up. Rather than waiting for them to happen in the moment, think, yourself, your life, your family, the things that tend to get in the way. What is likely going to stop me from following through on that task, and how could I try to problem solve those ahead of time? So it's really not about getting rapid results. It's not about making this giant change right now. It's just about trying to start this progress in the right direction, again, to make us feel like we're doing something helpful, we're doing something productive and meaningful for my overall well-being.
And, I can resonate with what you're saying, because at the start of the pandemic, after 2 weeks and feeling all like hemmed in and thinking, all right, I got to do something like, to de-stress a bit, get my day started. I just started this online 10-minute morning yoga thing. I'm not a yoga person, but I started doing this, and I told my husband, I don't want you coming downstairs while I'm doing this, because I didn't want to be interrupted. And this is the thing, I partnered with him. I need this time in the morning for me. So this is one of the things you need to do. If you pick something and you have small goals, I knew I wasn't going to do a 30-minute yoga or a 60-minute yoga online, 10 minutes. Just doing that, and I partnered with him. You give me this space, I'm going to give you space where you need it. So think about negotiating and carving out that time. And I'm so excited that I've been doing it all along. I'm the worst yoga person ever, I promise you. I fall over more than anything, but it's getting me to my goal, which is to do it each day.
That's great. I love that. You want to talk a little bit about managing stressful moments?
Yes, because we're having them. I know we're having them because I get calls at times from some of the young adults I'm working with and their parents, and also from my own daughters. So managing stressful moments, because we are in a tough time. And we have to think about this. You actually have experience now of the past several weeks, and you can think back again during these times when things have been stressful in different ways, within the family, with work, with whatever you're doing in your house in terms of keeping things up and such. What are some of the coping strategies that have worked well for you? What have you done? It may have been putting on a mask at 9 o'clock at night and just taking a walk around the block. It may have been putting yourself into a room where no one else is and sitting down and just doing deep breathing for a few minutes, right? Or it could be at the end, like for me, at the end of the evening, when everything's all said and done, I have to read a book that has nothing to do with psychology or anything like that. I'm just reading a novel. And what am I reading? Maybe 3 pages at the most, and then going to sleep. So think about, for you, what are some kinds of coping strategies that are simple, that are portable, that are reasonable and realistic for you to do. And these are the things that we need to have at our pocket at different times to take out when the cake is fallen, when the kids are yelling, when things are blowing up in different ways. What can you do? I think deep breathing is one of the best and easiest and quickest for us.
Yeah.
You could carry this one on, right?
Absolutely. So same thing, just like we talked about with building your reserves, we want to sort of come up with a plan. How am I actually going to use those coping skills in stressful moments? So first thing I want to think about is, what is something I can tell myself when my stress level has rocketed up to a 10 out of 10? What is something I can tell myself that's going to help ease that tension, help reset my distress a little bit? And think of something that feels meaningful to you, something that will give you a little sense of lightness, something that will empower you. I have some examples up here to give some examples I've heard from families I worked with. I had one mom who would say, I'm super mom, I'm super mom, I'm super mom. I would have one mom who said, there's wine later, there's wine later, there's wine later. So anything that just sort of gives you that sense of, okay, I can get through this moment. There's a reason I'm doing what I'm doing. There's a reason I'm trying to stay calm. There's a reason I'm implementing this skill, and I can do this. And then we want to think about, what's a self-soothe task? What is something that makes me feel calmer, that helps to reset my energy when I'm feeling really escalated or really anxious or really worried and I'm about to lash out or say that thing I don't really mean to say. And just like Anne-Marie was saying, it's small, right? It's the big deep breath, right? It's a quick cup of tea. It's putting your favorite song on in the background. It's taking 5 minutes to read a book. And they don't have to be long activities. We're talking something that takes, 2 to 5 minutes, because we know you don't have an hour to go run to the spa, not that you can do that anyways, and then come back when you're really relaxed, right? We're just talking something that if you're at a 10 out of 10, it gets you to 6 out of 10. Even that's going to make the situation a little bit more manageable. And then, like Anne-Marie was saying before, think of the skills that have worked for you in the past. So if you have had helpful mottos that you told yourself, go back to them. I just had a mom I was working with who said, in college, I used to tell myself, hey, I've been through harder stuff than this before. She was like, I should probably use that again. And it's true. As hard as this is, she's been through worse. She can do this. If you like deep breathing, if you like mindfulness, if there's a certain song that makes you feel good, or a certain lotion that just makes you feel happy, do those things that you know have worked for you before. And then really plan a time that you're going to use those skills. So, do I need to start my day feeling refreshed? So I'm going to set an alarm on my phone to remind me to do it first thing in the morning. Do I need to do it before I go to bed? Or is there a conflict that I know comes up every day with my young adult, and I should probably plan to use my skill then? So if every day I'm struggling with my 18-year-old that 3 p.m. is the time for them to submit their homework, I'm going to set a reminder on my phone for 2:45 that says, take 3 deep breaths. And then I can go into the situation a little bit calmer than I would have. And think about reminders you're going to use. Is it phones? Is it a sticky note on the kitchen table that reminds you, count to 10, use your mantra, or use your social supports. If you have a partner at home, is there someone who can kind of keep an eye on you and give you a little signal like, hey, now's the time for the cup of tea. Or I can see that anger dial, ratcheting up, now's the time to use this skill. If you don't have someone at home, if you're a single parent or your partner is working a lot, you can still rely on social support. So, set up with your sister or your best friend that, hey, when I'm reaching my limit, can I text you? And can you just tell me to do this one thing? And sometimes it can be helpful to have a little cheerleader in our background helping us push through those really stressful moments.
And a big thing, and a big thing is the self-care tips that we want you to think about, because as you apply these to yourself, one of the things to bear in mind is your kids resonate with your moods. And this is true from the time they're prenatal. We know that the developing infant resonates with whatever the mother is experiencing. The fetus heart rate increases when mom's does. All kinds of things are in sync. And you know this from when they were little. If you were in a bad mood, they'd come up to you and, and they'd hug and they'd try to figure out did I do something? Well, it's the same thing with your young adults. So for here, let's think about how you take care of yourself. Taking care of your mind, number one, is turn off the news. And use mindfulness practices to calm yourself and to keep yourself focused. And the thing to think about is use your rational mind. Think about what is real and factual that will be helpful to you, and move yourself away from those things that are worries or that, or other people's opinions that can just spin you. Taking care of your body is incredibly helpful, again, with keeping to healthy habits, with hygiene, with self-care, with eating, with sleep, connecting to others. We can't, say this enough, that, and especially if you are single parents, please connect, reach out with friends, see if you can talk with other friends about sharing time of Zooming with one another's families so that they get a break, you get a break. And express your feelings in talking with others. Ask others to listen to you so that you can get some validation for how you're feeling from others, and you'll do the same for them. And then other things is trying to find the little things in life we can be grateful for and we can enjoy for ourselves, and not to feel it's selfish to spend time as a parent. If you need time for yourself to engage in a hobby or just an interest for yourself, it's important that you, or do your work and get work done, it's important that you do things that help you to feel better about yourselves. So then there's the teens. Take it away, Andrea. You want to do this?
Right? This is the tough one. So, you guys are aware of this. This entire situation is really difficult. And if it's difficult for us as adults, it's certainly difficult for young adults. It's really hard for the 17-year-old who is used to doing a certain pattern in a certain way with their school, with their friends, and here's my claim plan, to all of a sudden on a time have to completely adapt to a new scenario. And it's really scary, it's scary to think about risks to them. They might be scared about the people they care about. They might be worried about you as their parent or grandparents. And we know that there are worries that cover a range of areas. Safety, yes, but also how are mom and dad doing with finances? Are they worried about job loss? All of a sudden there are 3 young adults back at home and mom and dad were empty nesters, and we can feel everyone's tension rising. So it's really tricky. This is something they've never experienced before, and they're having to adapt, rapidly. And that's compounded by their own disappointments. There are missed graduations, there's missed proms, final art showcases that they've been working on all year, sports competitions that they've been building for their entire, lives. And it can feel really sort of crushing on top of all those real health, financial concerns that they're dealing with for the first time.
And this is something I want to talk about here, is independence. And this is something that at the Youth Anxiety Center, we have a program we developed called Launching Emerging Adults. And what it really focuses on is that this is the age, again, starting in middle school really, but especially through high school into college, there are developmental milestones that your kids are meeting and dealing with and mastering as they move towards adulthood. And one of the biggest one is independence. And it begins with the illusion of having more independence than they actually have. And that is so true with your high school students. They're out from you during the day at school. They're in after school stuff. They have friends they go out and hang out with. When they're not in your home, they are feeling a sense of independence that they may not actually have fully, of course, but there's that perception of it. And our perceptions of how much we have in terms of control in our lives is what gives us a lot of solace. Why we're feeling much anxiety right now during the pandemic is because our perceptions of control have been taken away. We can't control this virus. The whole world is having anxiety because of it. Now think about your perception of independence as a kid. And now all of a sudden you're home all the time and your parents are watching everything you do. Your school is online and they could see more of if you're working, if you're not working. And now think about your young adults who have come home from college where they actually do have independence. You don't know when they go to bed and get up when they're at college. You don't know if they're sleeping in their dorm or in someone else's dorm when they're at college. You don't know what they're doing because it's part of becoming an emerging adult and learning how to manage your independence. Now that everybody is home and under the watchful eye of their parents, even if you're not trying to watch, there's the perception that they're much more closed in than they may actually be. And so that's where tensions go high. And this is like very important right now, that these kids feel that they do have a sense of agency about themselves, as much as at the same time they respect that they're home with you, that they should be living, the way that you want to live with values in your house and pitching in and stuff. But at the same time, we've got to validate the feelings that they have of loss of control and of the disappointments, as Andrea said, because this is so critical to them as part of their development, that they're feeling that they're losing. And I just want to put it also in some more perspective here. If we think about it this way, they only have about 24 years in total to become, independent beings. And there are big milestones, especially middle school to high school to college, and there are big milestones in a very short period of time. they've got the rest of adulthood to be like us and, remake and reinvent and try this and try that. But right now, these are so meaningful for them, which is why it's so difficult for many of them right now to feel that they're losing independence and losing such meaning to what defines their age.
And I think too, just to add on to, it's so hard because right now when there are real threats, that's when our instincts as parents is to swoop in, right? We
Mm-hmm.
want to remind them to take their mask. We want to remind them, no, you can't do this, you can't do this. We just want them to be safe. But on top of all the ways that they're already being restricted and feeling like, oh my gosh, I've lost all my say, sort of this perfect storm where things can start to go a little south and a little tense. Which brings us to this idea of, okay, so that's all great. So how do we actually manage with the conflict? And those are most of the questions that you wrote in about is, how do we avoid the battles? How do we communicate with respect? And, if there were already any seeds of tension between you and your young adult, they're likely to be growing during this time, right? Even families with the most lovely, warm relationships are a little bit on edge these days with so much time spent in small, confined spaces, especially if you're in New York. There are external stressors. Kids have external stressors, and we don't have the normal outlets that we normally would. So there's just going to be a heightened sense of emotion at home for everybody. And now we're trying to balance, like Anne-Marie said, appropriate household expectations with your child's need for independence. So we want to start thinking about, okay, how are we working together as a family? What is appropriate? What kind of space do people need? It's not about being together every single second. It's about making sure that the time you spend together is meaningful, and also recognizing that everyone needs their own space and autonomy. I'm sure for any parent who's been interrupted 18 times over the course of a 2-hour work span, you can appreciate the need for some space, and so can your kids. And for those of you who aren't living at home with your young adult, we still want to think about, how do we maintain communication? How do we maintain connection? How can we be supportive, providing guidance, and setting appropriate expectations, and balancing their independence, which can be really tricky to do when they're not physically with you and you're not always sure where they are or if they're following through on what you'd like them to.
So what is this ideal situation with the teen or a young adult? What do we do? So that, your kids have probably been home for a while now. Some are coming home from having stayed with other friends and various things. I know that's been some arrangements folks have made, which has worked out well. But the big thing is, specifying and discussing with one another. What do you think with your partner? If you have a partner, think to yourself, what changes would you like to see your teen or young adult make at this point, now that you've been together for a bit? Are they respecting you and the values that you live within your home and with your family, right? And are they contributing, helping out in various ways? And this could be helping out by pitching in with chores or playing or doing things with younger kids in the house, or doing some chores for you, like the laundry and such. Are they doing things like this? This could be all part of what's going on in your home or needs to go on in your home and what you want.
And a lot of parents wrote in wondering, so, okay, I can think about my expectations, but what do I do when they won't follow through? Both with my expectations and with basic things they should be doing, like bathing, getting dressed, schoolwork, and really thinking ahead of time about what you want, and then making those expectations clear to them can be an incredibly helpful first step. So rather than telling them what you expected for them to do in the moment, let them know ahead of time. If you decide they need help to do the laundry, they should know that before 9 at night when they haven't done the laundry. And the same thing goes for you, is you're not having to battle with them when they throw the hamper at your door and say, hey mom, I need something tomorrow morning, right? So everyone has a sense ahead of time of who's supposed to be doing what in the household. And this is a good chance to collaborate with them. Are there certain things they'd rather do or not do? Older teens and young adults are perfectly capable of engaging in that conversation, and this is a nice time to get input for them and foster that sense of independence. Is there something that they want to get better at? Like maybe they really want to learn how to cook. that's a great chore to give them, even if it might mean a few not so great dinners altogether, right? You can be flexible and helpful. One thing that I think we hear a lot is, well, my teenager says they don't want to talk about it and they're not going to do anything. Fine. If you have a young adult who's going that route, no, mom, I don't care, you do it. No, dad, I don't care, you do it. Then you just get to set the rules and they can follow through or sort of have the consequences. And usually once kids realize, okay, I can either participate and get some of my needs met or not participate and just have to do what they say, they'll usually begin to engage in that conversation with you. It just might take a little bit of time. And we also want to think about making sure we're giving them what they need too. You know, are there things that they need from us to feel supported, to feel validated, to feel like they're getting a little extra independence or a little extra space, making clear that we're sort of respecting what they're looking for as well. And once we've set those expectations and our child is moving in the right direction, it's really crucial to sort of catch the positive. We tend to jump in when things are going wrong. When everything's going well, we're like, that's great, we'll leave well enough alone. But we swoop in when something didn't get done or they messed up or they said something disrespectful. But that can be pretty discouraging, make it less likely for them to engage in the things we want them to do. So we really want to acknowledge anything they're doing that's a step in the right direction. And we feel that way as parents too, right? It's your job to make dinner, but it's really nice to be thanked when you made dinner. And the same thing goes for your kids. When they actually did the laundry, when they helped you pick up the grocery order, whatever it is, making sure we're noticing that. And any behavior that's sort of above and beyond helpful. They're extra nice to their little sibling. They held their tongue when their shirt got, messed up or whatever it is. We want to make sure we're appreciating that and acknowledging that we can see they're working hard on those things. And then it could be a nice time, especially since we're all together, to engage in the things that they want to do. I'm sure everyone's seen the thousands of family TikTok dances that have been going on, even if that's not your cup of tea. If it's what your young adult wants to do, what's the harm, right? It's fun. It shows that you are interested in what they're interested in. You're willing to do something fun with them. And that can make a kid feel really, really special, even if that kid is 28 years old.
And I can hear some parents, I can hear you saying to yourselves, yeah, but how do you even start this? And so let me just say that the way that we start this first and foremost is, okay, you've seen how things have been going. You want to see some things change. Start by sitting down and asking your kids, how have you been doing? What's it like living here with us at home again? Or what's it like always being here? Here's where we want to invite them to talk first and listen, and just listen. And this is where we have to hold back from judging and jumping on, yeah, but if you would just help, or, oh, but this is our house. So first, just listen. This is the number one thing to get going. And we're going to talk about reflective listening here in a second, but the main thing with that is you want to give them the opportunity to know that you're open to hearing what they're saying and you want to validate. I understand that it could be hard on you, and I understand you get upset when we ask you to do things. All right? Because you don't want to dismiss, again, whatever you're feeling closed in due to COVID, your kids are feeling it too. So we want to validate their experience. And then we'll talk about, Andrea's going to talk about using these techniques. But what we want to get to is the ability for you to say, okay, look, I appreciate it's hard on you to do online schooling. It's hard on you because the other kids are all over the place too. It's hard on you for this, and this. We get it. We want to help you feel some easing up in that area. At the same time, we need you to help out with us. So let's talk about what you're willing to do to pitch in on our helping with the family, and we'll figure out too how we're going to help you. Because you make it then that you're collaborating with your kid, not that you're directing them and trying to control them again. So Andrea, with the reflective listening.
Yeah, and it's so helpful in that idea of managing conflict, because we've all had the experience where we've asked for something and it's met with defensiveness. Or we gave a demand and it's met with I don't want to do that, you do that, right? I am certainly guilty of saying that to my parents, maybe even as soon as last week, right? And it happens. But instead, if we can switch our approach and just come in, like Anne-Marie is saying, from a neutral, positive, reflective stance, your young adult doesn't have a need to be defensive. They don't have a need to get their guard up. And I think one of the things that's really common when our kids are upset are either to say, too bad, we got to do this, or we jump to problem solving. We say, it's not that big of a deal, or it's okay, we'll figure it out, or just do X, Y, and Z. And we really mean well, we're trying to be helpful, but it's not necessarily what your child needs. And it can lead them to feel like either you're not really listening, you don't really get it, or you're just trying to push them to do the thing that they didn't want to do, or they're not really ready to do. So when your child is talking to you, you're engaging with them, or when they come to you with a problem, recognize your young adults are probably really smart. They can figure out the solutions on their own if they wanted to, but if they're talking to you, they might just really want you to listen and be supportive and make them feel like they're being heard. So just like Anne-Marie said, actively listening without judgment. Instead of saying, are you sure about that? Or is that really what you want to do? We're just sort of recognizing, okay, I'm hearing that this is what you want. I see you're telling me that instead of doing this thing, you'd really like to do this thing, or it makes you feel this way when I say this thing, right? And this is a good chance when we're summarizing to let them course correct us if we were wrong. So if we reflect, here's what I heard you say, and it was off base, no problem. They can tell us that we didn't quite get it right, and then we can say, thanks so much for clarifying, right? We're trying to build this sense of collaborative communication rather than attack. And we're conveying the sense of understanding. It makes sense that you're feeling this way because, right? I can understand that you won't want to do this because you didn't have to do it when you were at college, and it must be kind of annoying now, right? It makes sense that you're going stir crazy. You haven't gotten to leave the house for more than 20 minutes in the last 8 weeks. And then we're really trying to see it from their perspective, and that reflective listening, that validation will help you do that. When you can really put yourself in your young adult's shoes and really think about, okay, if I was them and I'd had all these things change, and then I was faced with this stressor, no wonder they're responding the way that they are. It's going to dial down your intense reaction, and it's going to make you much more collaborative and much more accessible for your young adult to be open and honest and communicative with you. I will say these skills are sort of deceptively difficult. We think that they should be easy. It's like, yeah, I can summarize my kid, no problem. But more often than not, when we try to practice this with families, it's really hard to do. So practice with another adult first. Practice with your partner, with your sister, with your mother. Just practice repeating back what they're saying to you, or try out some language like, it makes sense that you're feeling this way given everything that's going on. If it's with a partner, you can have them give you a little feedback. Did that land right? Or did it sound critical or what have you? And if not, you can just gauge their reactions, right? When I said things this way, did they open up more or did they clam up? So give it a few trial runs first before you implement with your young adult. It can be really tricky.
And then goals are big. And again, collaborating on goals is probably the best thing that we can do, because this slide is a little deceptive on our part. It's not that you pick a few short-term goals. It's that you engage your young adult. Okay, while we're here together, what are the things that you will do? And we'll talk about the things that we're going to be doing to make the house sing a little more in harmony, and not that people are off key. And it's about you all coming together. Again, it's a shared family values. So what are the things that you're willing to do? And it could be empty the dishwasher, as you see, or such. Pick these short-term goals that'll happen during the course of the week, and then maybe a longer-term goal that they'll achieve over the next few months. And these are things like applying for internships that'll be coming up down the line, or following up on some project they're going to be working on that's a longer-term thing. And these are things that everyone can observe. The point isn't for you, though, to be the police watching to see if your kid is doing this thing. But it's more about, especially with the family goals, it's more about, again, everybody's pitching in and doing their part. And for the longer term goals, it's checking in with, how's that coming? Is there anything you need help with? So that you show that you're available and interested, but not that you're directing. And especially it's important for their longer term goals, quite frankly, that they do these things independently for themselves.
Mm-hmm. And there was a question that maybe you can elaborate on. People are asking, so what's an appropriate set of expectations or goals, given that things have sort of been turned upside down right now? And I think that can be tricky with young adults, especially everything going on.
Yeah, and you know, we have a 5-session parent group that we do, and we talk a lot about this. And when it comes to when the kids are still living at home with you or have moved back home and such, a lot of, like, especially around the house, a lot of the things that we try to deal with is mom and dad or mom, whoever, you know, head of household, we're here and we're providing home, we're providing internet, we're providing food, and we love you, we're taking care of one another. This is our, you know, we go to our jobs or we're working from home now. These are the things that we're doing for all of us. We need you to pitch in, and to pitch in on a few things that are about you. So that could be your own laundry. It could be keeping up with your room. And then there's also pitch in with something, you know, a few things around for the whole family. So while one person might be making meals, mom might be making the meals. Maybe your thing that you can do is setting the table or cleaning up after dinner, whatever, but they've got to pick this thing. Now, the thing is, for parents, if it's something about them themselves, their own laundry, their, you know, taking care of their room, if they don't do it, you don't do it for them. You have to let that go. Then, though, if it is around things that it's the whole family sharing in, you know, so it's helping at mealtime or something like that, that's where we have to talk about, all right, these are the things that we negotiated and you said you would do them. So these are the things that you have to come across with and fulfill. So those are the things that we'll talk about then. What are consequences if they don't fulfill the goals and fulfill the task that as a family you're agreeing to work with together?
Great. And when we think about those consequences, we want to think about, you know, coming up with a very clear plan of, if you do this, then great, here's what you get. And if you don't do this, okay, here's what happens. So we want to think about what's important to our young adult. What do they care about? Is it screen time? Is it access to Netflix? If you live in the suburbs, is it car keys so they can at least go for a drive? Like, what is it that they care about? What are developmentally appropriate for them? You know, a consequence for a 28-year-old is not going to be the same as a consequence for an 18-year-old. So what makes sense for them and where they're out? And then we want to think about, in terms of the actual follow through, it's really important for consequences to be consistent. So for example, if your consequence has to do with screen time, but you really need your child to have their screen time so you can get a few hours of work done, and you're not going to be able to take that away consistently, you got to think of a different consequence that you're not going to mind sort of doling out on a consistent basis. And then when we deliver consequences or we set them up, it's just matter of fact. I'm not yelling, I'm not angry, my face isn't really angry, because my tone and my volume, those aren't the punishment. The loss of screen time is the punishment. The docking of the allowance is the punishment. So, all right, you didn't set the table. You know, you won't get your 15 extra minutes of screen time tonight. I'm sure you'll have a chance to earn it tomorrow. It's really just sort of neutral information. And when we think about that conflict management approach, that's part of it. I don't need to escalate my volume, my tone, my etc., because we know that's just going to set your young adult off. Let the punishment do the talking for you. I can stay nice and neutral down here, and I'm just giving my child information that, hey, you didn't do the thing you were supposed to do, so you don't get this reward. And when we think about, again, what's a reasonable consequence, what's the time around it? Did they lose screens for 15 minutes or for an hour? Some parents are tempted to say, okay, you lost screens for the next week. A lot of times it's a little more than is helpful for any of us, because if they lost screens for a week, we have no currency left that they want to earn. And a lot of times that's really more based on our own anger reaction than it is appropriate to the thing they did. So again, we want to set this up ahead of time when we're calm, when we're in a neutral headspace, to think about, okay, if they don't set the table, if they don't do the laundry, if they didn't turn in their assignment for their course, what seems like an appropriate reward or punishment for those behaviors. And then we want to carry that out in a reasonable amount of time. So if we don't deliver the punishment until a week from now, it's not going to be as meaningful to your child. So you want to do something that you can do on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah, I think one of the big things here is that as your kids are aging, and especially into the college age, the natural consequence of not turning in a paper, the natural consequence of not keeping up with returning emails to professors or teachers, those are the things they have to experience. And you can't rescue them from them. That's an important thing to know. And yeah, it does mean sometimes failing a class. It's not until they experience natural consequences that they understand the responsibility is theirs, and that the consequences mean repeating a class or being on academic probation or whatever it might be. As parents, I have to tell you, look, if you saw my college transcript, you would see D's, you would see F's on it. Yeah, I messed up early on. And, you know, my parents were like, okay, that's what happened. What do you think you're going to do? What are you going to do next? And it helped me to see I had to take school more seriously. So this is the thing, you can't fix things for them in that way. You can help advise them as to, okay, do you want to you write to the professor, ask to do something, you know, an extra paper or what have you, but it's got to be them to do. So think about this, because with young adults, natural consequences are significant, and they're the things that change behavior.
Someone put in a question in the question and answer, which I think is a good question. Aside from those natural consequences for things they don't care as much about naturally, like setting the table, like doing your laundry, what's an appropriate consequence for a 20-year-old?
Well, the thing is, then, you know, maybe setting the table and doing the laundry isn't the thing that you're working with them. What is it what will they work for, and what would they agree to do? And this is why we have the parents meet with the youth and talk about, okay, how are we going to live together? And what we ask of you as your parents is respect for the fact that we've got this home, we're all here, and to get along means we each got to do stuff together, you know, to pull weight. So what are you willing to do? And nothing is not an option. It's got to be something. What are you willing to do? And if you are willing to be the person who, you know, does some laundry, or if you're willing to be the one who cooks the meal a couple times, if these are the things you're willing to do, that's great. In return, we'll keep the internet going. You can get your, you know, call in for food of your choice a couple times a week. We will keep these things that we provide for you going. That's what we're asking to do, that we all come together in that way. So those are the kinds of things you have to find out what they're willing to do, and to put it in the sense of respect of one another in this home.
And I think it's great too, because when you frame it that way, it's about them making a choice, right? I'm not taking things away just to be mean. You sort of knew up front what the deal was. And if you chose not to do the thing that you agreed to, then okay, that's your choice. And we're not going to give you your meal of choice on Saturday night, or we're not going to keep the Wi-Fi on. And that's fine. You can make that decision, but you have some responsibility too as a young adult.
Yeah.
So overall, we sort of, again, want to think about, with consequences, how can I be consistent? How am I going to make sure I'm following through? And I still want to validate their experience, right? I can validate, hey, I know it's really total pain to have to do the laundry. You're tired and you want to go to bed, right? I can validate that it might feel unfair to them that they didn't used to have to do this thing, and now they do. And I'm still going to praise any progress, any achievement towards those goals. And I think one thing to keep in mind is, you know, we're not looking for 100% right away. We're just looking for any step in the right direction. So if ultimately you hope your child cooks dinner, again, 3 nights a week, but they look up a recipe this week, Awesome. Thanks so much for coming with the recipe. This looks so delicious. I can't wait to make it. We want to give lots of positive praise and attention for any appropriate behavior, especially those ones that are going to help them build independence at a time when a lot of their natural outlets for that aren't available to them. All right, so we're a little bit over, but maybe we can answer one or two of the questions that you all sent in. We had a few. Anne-Marie, do you want to get started with one?
Well, one of the ones here, how do I respond when my young adult becomes completely withdrawn or refuses to communicate with me? And one of the things we see there is, let's meet them where they are and meet them in that don't demand that they talk. And I know some of the kids will sequester themselves in their room and things, but they do come out to eat. And you know, what you can do is just be mindfully quiet while you're with them. The interesting thing is, the more you do that and you take away the expectation of speaking, what they misperceive as you're judging them or trying to control them, it's interesting then that you start hearing them speak. And oftentimes it's like, what are you thinking? Why are you looking at me? And it's like, no, I'm just sitting here. I mean, but it's just getting them to get away from the conflict. And then you might think about, if they're watching, you know, if you have a TV room or what have you, and there's something they're watching, just sitting quietly and watching it without commenting on, oh, who's that actor or whatever. But again, just sitting quietly and just mindfully being with them. This gets kids to come out oftentimes of their shell or being withdrawn. But we do want to watch that withdrawal isn't something that's bigger, not that it's just pushing against the parents, but we want to make sure that your kids are not withdrawn from even their own peers and others that they do normally talk to. So watch for that, because otherwise there may be something else going on, and we want you to give a call so that we can talk with you and see, is there a way the Youth Anxiety Center can be of help.
And one other question, the two last questions I think sort of go hand in hand. How do I get my young adult to use these skills when they're really angry, they have difficulty expressing emotions? How do I get siblings to avoid conflict with each other? I think a couple of things. One, going back to the idea of, what do we want our household to look like? You know, this is a collaborative conversation. Nobody really wakes up in the morning thinking, man, I hope I get into a big fight today with my mom. Man, I can't wait to bug my sister till she yells at me. Maybe a 7-year-old does, but most young adults don't wake up feeling that way. So engaging in those conversations with your young adults, what do you want this household to look like? How do you want our interactions to go? Here are a few things that are helpful for me to stay calm. Is there anything you can think of as being helpful in staying calm? I think, again, pointing out any progress in the right direction. When you noticed that they took their big deep breath as they were starting to get frustrated, highlight that. Hey, awesome job staying calm, even though I know this is a stressful situation. If your daughter doesn't jump down your son's throat when he says something annoying, circle back to her later and say, man, I really appreciated you not escalating that fight. Thank you so much. And I also think your own behavior models so much for your adults. Like Anne-Marie was saying before, kids are so in tune with their parents' emotions. They feed off of that energy. They see what they're doing. So if you can demonstrate you're taking the deep breath, you're saying, I need a break, I'm getting upset, I'm gonna go have a cup of tea. You're showing them, A, here are a few strategies that are effective, and B, it's not just something you have to do. It's something I have to work on too, and I think it's important enough for me to actively try on a regular basis, and it really sends this message to them that, hey, this is something that we all have to work on. It's part of what you do as you get older. You take responsibility for your emotions and your communication, and I can do some things to do that more effectively. All right, everyone. We're sorry we don't have time for more questions, but we hope that this was helpful. We really appreciate you joining us. Remember, if you would like to rewatch it, if you'd like to send this to someone you know, you can go to the Youth Anxiety website that you see on the bottom right corner, and there are recordings of this webinar and all of our other webinars. And next week, keep in mind, we have 2 other webinars coming up. The first is for your teen or your young adult on how to stay connected during social distancing. And the last one is for you, the second one is for you as parents. How do you help your young adult navigate these abrupt transitions that they're facing in their lives? We'll have more to come in the following week, so please feel free to check our website regularly to see what other topics are coming up. And please fill out the survey if you have any recommendations for other topics you'd like to see in the future.
Thank you all so much.